Hello and welcome to a new episode of PowerTalks, the Energy Management Podcast. Today we are going to talk about the topic sustainable energy and how sustainable energy transforming businesses the way they operate. So let's get started with this topic and I wish you a lot of fun.
Hello, everybody, and welcome again to our new episode of our podcast, Janitza PowerTalks. Today, I would like to welcome back our colleagues from overseas. We have Michael Da Costa, Entity Manager from Janitza Australia, and we have Hari Bala, Entity Manager from Janitza India. So today we have another very interesting topic in our sessions. It is called Transforming Businesses with Sustainable Energy. Great nowadays and modern topic. So it brings me actually to an intro question to you guys. What are the first touch points you had in your career with sustainable energy meters? Mike, probably.
Well, so mine starts 17 years ago. I remember looking at a data sheet for an energy meter. And the first page everyone understands, this is what it does and so on. And then I went to the second page. And then I went to the third page. And you guys have been through this as well, right? And you start reading and reading and reading. And I didn't know what I was talking about. And then so I thought I'd ask my colleagues, my older colleagues who have been engineers for a while. And then I asked my mentor. And nobody knew what it meant. So I really wanted to find out what these parameters were. What was it really talking about? And so this started 17 years ago. Yes.
Sorry, 30 years back when we were selling those digital meters, the impression was only to replace with those analog meters, right? So when we started with this, we tried hard to sell those digital devices to replace multiple analog devices. That's the transition what we were expecting. But over a period of time, we thought that it is doing something more than just a replacement of that, right? The electronics improved, and we started getting more and more information from the same devices, which could be reasonably used by the consumers for their own benefits. So that was a very interesting evolution which has happened on these electronic devices. And now what we are doing today is phenomenally a large volume of information what we have.
True point. Glad that I have two experts here with long time experience into that. So very cool. Brings us, let's say, to our first point. How would you define the sustainable energy solutions? What are unique opportunities and what does it offer? Actually, Hari, you touched point something. A lot of data can be achieved now.
Lots of information, energy, power quality information, what we get from these places. Because the grid is not the same what it used to be 20 years back or 30 years back. Now, the grid is weakening step by step, depending on where you are placed and on the environment of the grid. So that makes a lot of difference for the customer, so that they need to be aware where they are in the grid and what kind of consumption of data what they have. Right, that becomes a very, very crucial part for them to do it. So it's as such, the data or what we get it from these kind of devices should give us more and more insights into these grid stability, more and more into how the way we consume power and what kind of troubles we have in the quality of the power we receive. All these things are much more guiding factors for this.
I think the first part of your question was, how do you define it?
Yes.
Forget it. After 17 years, Hari touched on it. People might have the same building, the same industrial site, the same everything. But Hari's right. We all use energy differently. So how do you define a sustainable solution? No, it starts with a conversation. It starts understanding how that person and that company, or even that person, that team, the company, uses energy.
True point. So what is actually, from your experience, what are the key drivers for companies to adopt the sustainable energy solution into their operations nowadays?
Well, if I continue that answer, then, okay, what are the key drivers? We all want to say reduce energy. And hey, bosses say we're going to save money. Excellent. But is that the true key driver? If I wasn't going to save anything, I still want to be efficient. Same with our cars, right? The car might cost more, but I want a more efficient car.
Yes.
So what are the key drivers for me? I want to know I can be as efficient as possible. And when I talk with clients, that's how I talk with them. Yes, there's always going to be a cost, but it doesn't need to start with a cost. So
if you see few years back, at least in India, there were not much of solar power plants. Now the solar power plants are mushrooming everywhere, on top of the buildings, top of the houses, small or big. So we have systems from 1 kilowatt onwards on the rooftops. So when all these systems come up, it actually plays very, very important. EVs coming up, for example.
True.
Then there are a lot of conversions happening from AC to DC on the grid everywhere. Ultimately, we need to be seeing how the quality of the power what we are receiving is good. And secondly, we are also sometimes importing power and exporting power when we have solar power plants in these places. So these things needs to be measured, how much we import, how much we export, and what is our load at the same time consuming, which kind of power it is consuming, and all these things needs to be seen, and this becomes a very big driver for us.
Very true. Yeah. What are the, let's say, which sustainable energy technologies are currently most applicable for large enterprise companies? And what is, let's say, the benefit of cooperating with these settings?
You should wanted to say with this?
Well, let's talk about the project we all worked on, right? It was a few years ago now. With the one we're talking about is the smart warehouse in Australia, right? What a cool concept. For those who are listening, there's a very well-known company we worked with to design this solution. Now, when we first started talking about it, thinking of robots picking and packing something we bought online, right? How did we then come up to do a solution? And for those who are listening, the original conversation was around energy, but the team within the team was asset management. And when they started talking to me about if there was a voltage spike on the network from all these robots and all these robotic arms, the conveyor would overshoot.
Yeah.
So the precision of what this warehouse had to do was phenomenal. I know we walked the site once, right? We originally saw it was open, and to explain how big it was, and then it was that multi-layer warehouse. Like, what a cool, concept. So talk about innovation, technology. Yes, it starts with the meter, but it starts with the conversation of, are we looking at energy? Are we looking at power quality? And really, it all becomes one conversation, doesn't over time. So I have to say, to answer that question, it's the application we all did, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
And it's basically starts on that point, everything with the metering, yeah, to implement our meters, for various applications. Yeah. Could you give, from your experience, some example of innovative, sustainable energy solution that was transformed in practice with our systems for micro problems?
Yeah, and we'll continue that scenario. So if from the sustainable point of view, it was a new site. So how do you know you're being sustainable? We'll go back to your original question. What does a sustainable solution look like? But if we talk about efficiency, I know you and I talk about voltage fluctuation within a site all the time, and then explain that to a client. They're actually generating it. Don't blame the grid. You're generating it from within. So if we look at that sustainable solution and an example, yes, you're spot on. I always talk about a metering system. This is where you can't just understand your consumption and try and reduce it, because this is far beyond. So if we talk about our technology, then our solution, this has to be the best test case, right? We metered from the incoming supply. Then you and I looked at the demand side of the business.
Yes.
Then we were looking at power quality guys, because they couldn't even turn the conveyors on, from the word go, because the voltage was too high. It met the Australian standards, but it didn't meet the design standards.
Yes.
So we end up metering from top to bottom, right? All the way to the final circuit to understand power quality. But if you don't talk about a cool solution, that's a cool solution.
It was very impressive.
Yes.
In fact, what is important is when customers start measuring the device and start putting it into a database, and after a few years, I'm talking about 3, 4, 5 years, they can precisely see their seasonal changes, the way in which how the organization is working. We can also see how the trending of energy is changing according to the weather, time, date, so many factors.
Yeah.
And this gives them a lots of insights in how they can manage it much more better. So I'm not talking about 1 year or 2 year data. Beyond 2 years, the data is a huge wealth for this customer. But we need to have a sustained 2 years of data plus, right? So then you have these kind of information very meticulously into these kind of systems.
Actually, this is already a practical example, but going back to the beginning on that side, what would you say are the most challenges or even barriers which companies or clients which we are consulting and supplying later on are facing when they want to integrate or to monitor sustainable energy?
Yeah. And look, we hear this all the time. The first thing is people say, what is the cost? But that's actually not true. It's the buy-in from the team. It's always the buy-in from the team. When you strip everything back, it's the buy-in from the team. One team within a team wants the metering system. And I know we spoke about metering, we didn't even talk about the software and monitoring, right? And they know this. They understand how this is going to be efficient for the business. But could you imagine telling 500 people, we're going to change the way we do things? That's right. But there's only 5 people telling the 500 people. You think to yourself, are you kidding me? So the real buy-in is not the cost of the system. It's the buy-in from everyone understanding the stakeholder management, right? Like, or understand what we're doing and why.
Many times it becomes a mild fear from these users that what will I do with this data? Whether will I be able to do something, get something out of this data? Should I learn something new? So it means the data, what is presented by these systems should be in a possibly easy for them to understand and then see it how they wanted to take some easy decisions.
Yep.
So there is also a reasonable fear among the users that whether I will be in a position to get a good amount of information and do some corrections in my system.
Yeah.
That it's like without getting into your water trying to swim. So
Yeah.
so that's how it is. Yeah.
Harry and I have spoken about this in the past, where we feel people don't want to be exposed because, oh, you're the one consuming too much energy. Your department, your machine, your robot, your conveyor, your system. So it's interesting when we really talk about metering and monitoring, we always find it wasn't the price, it wasn't the team buy-in. People don't want to be exposed, but when they really do see how they're using energy, it's the light bulb moment, isn't it? It's the, aha, now I know how to fix it, right? But you have to carefully take them there, right? Yes.
Adam, there is an example in an office building. If it's when people are not there and then they are consuming 20% more energy in an office building, and then that creates a tough answer for the management also how this is possible.
Yeah.
But maybe it is a simple process which needs to be done to change the whole thing. But once you present the data with these kind of intricate data, then it becomes a bit of putting these consumers on not in a very slippery way, slippery place.
Right.
So that's how it is.
Interesting. By your experience, is there any specific tool or resources needed which we would recommend for the people or companies to aiming the track of energy efficiency? I mentioned it, or you mentioned it, you said it already some minutes ago. Some metering is definitely a point, but is there any special tools which might be needed that people get more info?
They can use our Grievous, which can give them a lot of information about the analytics and various other graphs from it, bar charts, and various other charts which they can, by seeing it, they know what exactly is happening. For example, the heat map and stuff like that can be very, very helpful for the customer if they start building on it.
Yeah. And again, this is where we've spoken about the government incentives, the industry bodies. There's always local government, even corporate policies that support what Hari just mentioned. It's not always us talking to the end user and hoping that they understand what we're talking about. So if we talk about a support network or incentives or really what's in your local region, yes, we always work with government. We've always supported, or we both present for industry groups at home to support really not the people, but even just the understanding of what we're talking about.
So it's definitely also a policy and government-related point which we toss here.
Spot on. Yes. Yeah.
Many corporates are actually coming up with their own energy management vision. Yeah.
Right.
So energy sustainability goals, and then they try to implement it. And this is a fantastic thing for the industry because the energy consciousness comes from the top for efficiently managing their energy. So that becomes a very important aspect. And in fact, lots of corporates are taking that way. And MSMEs, the smaller and medium scale industries, also should take that way, because now it's only we are talking about large corporates. Once when smaller corporates and smaller industries also take those steps, then it becomes very good for the environment and also for the future energy consumption.
Yeah, it ties in with your original question, right? Define a sustainable solution, but it's not. Harry summed it up. You look from a small to a medium business to now corporate policy. Everybody's different. Could be the identical building that's consuming 20% more.
Yes.
But everyone has, so again, to really talk about policy, local government, local industry, it's a one team effort.
Is that something that we are into some partnerships with different providers, or are we somehow limited in some place, or are we open for most of the application side? What is your experience?
We have more or less all our devices are open devices, which can talk to any of the systems. So it's not only our software, but our hardware is also pretty open, where people can take lots of information from that, just basic few parameters. But there are so many information which can give them a holistic view of the system. So I would encourage all our partners not to limit the data getting out of our devices. Rather than, I would say that they should take a gamut of device parameters from our devices for their analysis purpose, which can be beneficial to them.
Michael, what role would you say data analytics play for optimization of energy and sustainable?
Massive. Look, again, if we were talking about when I started to where we are today, and people were writing down information from analog and digital meters and they'd walk around, and now, even if we talk about meters back then had time of use, well, what's the use of writing it down? When was it used? How was it used? Why was it used? So, obviously, I love our GridViz product, right? And I look at the analytics from that. But I have these conversations at home all the time, and we talk about the energy consumption, the way we use it, the heat map, the Sandkey diagram. It's a data-rich environment, and the analytics simply complements that by understanding how we use energy.
Interesting. So it's actually a point also of return on invest for the people. Yes, spot on. Because they see what they might be achieving too. So yes, definitely point in that show. Correct. Let's say some other say measuring points where we say that can be a return on invest, or reports. Do we have some special highlights for sustainable parts, especially?
Definitely. And there's always a return on investment. If we purely focus, I hate saying this, purely focus on energy and reducing it, there's a simple return on investment. Obviously, energy is less used, we save more money. But then we talk about the power quality side, and that's the cool conversation, because same system, same meters, when you start reducing all this wastage, it's consumption we have to use.
Yes.
But there's wastage from everything we do, from your TV at home to there's power quality issues and all these little wastages. If we analyze that and understand how we can attenuate that, reduce that, then you can also talk about a return on investment. And it's interesting, because we talk about, people used to talk about power factor correction in a commercial building.
Right.
But if you reduce the harmonic content as well, then the power factors also increase, which is savings in itself. So we can go a little bit deeper in technical conversations, but you've got to start with our original conversation of the meter and the software and analytics, and then we fine tune. And that's,
So get the feeling you're absolutely the power quality man here, that down. But let's say also for our listeners, let's say the sustainable energy has various much components inside. So power quality is a subject inside, power factor is a subject. Yeah, but everything, let's say, relates also to sustainable.
In fact, when we start seeing what is the consumption today, what was the consumption yesterday, what is the consumption this last hour and the previous last hour, naturally, it works on our mind. So once if this data is transparent and put on a common place in an industry, like they put it for safety accidents, right? Number of days without accidents. This is a very common thing in many of the places, but it's very important that we say the same thing for the energy also. This is my consumption today. This was my consumption yesterday. Then this works on the people. and then it becomes much more easier to save energy as well. Yeah, but it's wherever they can.
Yeah, that's right. And if you tie your two questions together about analytics and ROI, it's easy to see reduced consumption. But if we start using the analytics and talk about return on investment on assets, different conversations, right? Sometimes people say, "Oh, I've had this motor that I thought won't last 10 years, and now we've had it sitting there running for 30 years, and it just whispered quiet." How many times do you hear this, right? We spoke about power factor correction. Ideal time is 14 years, but it's actually around 11 years based on operations.
Yeah.
But some people had the same PFC running for 20 years, right? So you talk about asset management. So add in analytics and add in your return on investment, looking at your assets. Every business has assets, from your computers to whatever equipment. So the longevity of this, when you talk about ROI, yes, you can see a reduction on costs on assets. Crazy thought today, because everyone wants to talk about reduction and consumption.
Yeah. Cool. Finally, what kind of information would you give as a piece of, let's say, advice for marking the energy uses more sustainable to some clients? What would
They should immediately start monitoring, and at least 80% of their loads to be monitored. That's what I would say. Yeah. And if they have any questions, we are always there in Janitza. They can always approach us, and we would be glad to give them a right solution.
But yeah, I'd say the same thing. You know what? Skip all the technical talk. Just have a conversation. It doesn't cost anything. Oh, I might charge you for a coffee, but right, just have a conversation. We're here to talk. Like we said before, we support governments and industry bodies and so on. Just have a conversation. It'll lead to a nicer ROI.
Definitely, Bond. At the end, we're all people who make the decisions, emotional ways, and as well, let's say, technical driven. So on that side, so true point. Thanks very much, gentlemen. Was glad to have you here. Thanks. See you hopefully by our next episode. Yeah, and for all the listeners and viewers, you're always welcome to join our Janitza information sources on the web. Also, as Harry and Michael said, please get in touch with us and see our trainings and webinars. Thank you very much, and see you next time.
Thank you.
Thank you, Harry, for joining us, and thank you, Tobias and Michael, for the exciting insights.
For our listeners, stay up to date and check the website of Janitza for the latest news.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.